welcome to Shedunnit, Crime Writing with Helen and Jacey. This month's episode, I am talking about the character of Randall Lauder, who is an LAPD vice cop. He's quite a complex individual who produces hugely varying reactions in my readers. My genre is crime noir. I'm trying to flip the stereotypes of noir and I'm trying to come up with some new ones myself. So Randall Lauder being a vice cop in the LAPD, he sort of screams stereotype. And to some extent, yes, he is. He's kind of brooding. We don't know much about him. He comes over like a tough guy. This is certainly in book one, Jailbird Detective. On one hand, we don't know him, except through her eyes. But on another hand, we can read his contradictory behavior in interesting ways. As a male character, when people say to me, oh, are you Elvira Slate? Are you, what character are you in your books? Well, I think most writers would agree that we are all our characters. We're every single one. We take something from ourselves and we inject into who these characters are. Something that we're trying to say that we can safely do through those characters. And I pick up on these things in the podcast quite a lot. What he does mean to me is he is a symbol of what I feel as an author is really important. It's about criminal justice, or rather criminal injustice. So Randall Lauder represents the need for change in how we understand criminal behavior and how we allow rehabilitation of offenders. And that's a theme that's very close to my heart. So Randall Lauder is a trope in that he's nasty. We don't know his agendas. He can be a tough guy. But I'm trying to inject a complex personality behind the facade of the trope. Family originally is from Poland. They escaped the pogrom. They're Jews. His parents run a hardware store in Orange County. I think he thought that he wanted to do good and he wanted a salary and he wanted to he didn't want to run the hardware store. A lot of crime fiction, we have the theme of restorative values of the cops, justice for those who have been wronged. But in Elvira Slate, obviously, a lot of people have been wronged by society. So that notion of restorative justice doesn't really apply in that, law enforcement will restore order. And we also have a very corrupt LAPD. We've seen that in countless films and stories, the corruption of cops. But in the 40s, it was white, it was violent, it was, the history of the LAPD. I'm not going to go into there now, but I've researched it quite a bit. And at the end of the day, there were a few women secretaries, but this was a boys' club, and it was quite a nasty boys' club. To survive in that environment, you really have to kind of be a toxic male. So Randall Lauder also represents, to me, the need for the masculinity of the 40s, which was actually pretty oppressive, to change. So kind of that's what he's representing as well. And he will change slowly but surely. Randall Lauder is the last in a long line of bad boys that Elvira Slate has some kind of relationship to. She's kind of attracted to these men who ultimately aren't very good for her. Now, Randall Lauder is going to change because of his relationship with Elvira Slate. And it's a complicated, starts out incredibly toxic relationship because he's the aggressor, she's the victim. So it's a complicated agenda. So that's flipped pretty quickly, but there is essentially a huge amount of distrust between them. There's a kind of weird chemistry between Elvira and Randall because he is someone that in the past she would have been attracted to, maybe physically. Mentally, it's awful. And some readers do actually quite like the kind of vibe between them and they want more of it. Some readers are like, oh, he's awful. Why have you got him? He's not nice and he is actually violent to her. He, to me, represents a kind of need for redemption in the character. I mean, on one hand, I could cancel him, and perhaps I should, and that would mean killing him off. And it's far more interesting to me to think, who is the individual behind the tough guy mask, behind the product of the really oppressive LAPD world? Who is the human being? And is he capable of changing? If he is going to be a symbol for a crumbling patriarchy, which I think he is to me, because I kind of thought about it, how is he going to change? What does that mean for him as a character? But symbolically, what does that mean for the book series? And where am I going to go with him if he is the symbol of a toxic patriarchy? So I don't really want to kill him off for that reason, but I do want him to grow and change and learn and understand, because for me, that's the best way of making change. So Lauder starts out with this very, fixed and rigid notion of right or wrong. And Elvira Slate is going to completely explode all his preconceptions. And I think he understands on a deep level that she has been victimized. So he doesn't want to hand her over, because if he does, she will be killed. She will be hung. She will be sent back to Holloway, and she is likely to be found guilty of murder. So he is, in a sense, saving her, and she is obligated to him. But he is kind of, in his head, doing her a favor. He is equally putting himself on the line to help her out. So she is part of the kind of, shifting sands of Randall Lauder, that actually he's going to have to question himself and what he believes in. Randall Lauder is, in a way, a kind of insider vigilante, in that he protects Elvira Slate when he really shouldn't do it. And I like this slight sort of rebel edge to him. I like the fact that he can actually do something nice, but he's not a Mark Darcy. He's not a romantic hero. I've really tried to sort of, unfortunately, she is attracted to him, and this might be problematic for some readers, that he's got this kind of sex appeal that she's quite attracted to, because actually it's a very unequal relationship. But as the books develop, and certainly in the new book, Third Woman, Randall Lauder and Elvira's relationship takes a completely different change. And I really hope that you find out what I've done with it. He does want to protect the weak up to a point, because he's a realist in that way. I mean, he doesn't want to see an innocent woman hung, but he equally isn't an idiot. He doesn't want to, put himself on the line. So he's going to have to tread a really fine line in deciding how to deal with her. So Randall Lauder, he does do some horrible things. And one of those things is, in trying to find out the truth about Elvira, he hits her. And I think this was quite shocking for me to write, because I'm trying to flip the stereotypes of noir, and yet, I've done violence against my protagonist. But I think in doing that, I wanted to say more about how she's going to respond to that, and equally how he is going to have to learn that as a cop, he's also committed a crime. He will never get prosecuted for that, obviously, but other people will be done for battery and assault. And so from our contemporary view, we think, oh, you're not nice, you've hit a woman. But on the other hand, he's thinking in his eyes, well, I'm putting myself on the line for her. I'm putting my whole life on the line for her. But I want him to be tortured by his own guilt. I want him to understand why his early treatment of her was wrong. Because she's come from a lot of abuse in her life. She was beaten by women in the orphanage. She was beaten by nuns. So she knows physical abuse, and she is quite, hardened to it. Yes, of course, it leaves a lasting scar, but she equally is going to grow. She's going to grow out of her sort of complicated feelings about Randall Lauder. On one hand, Elvira will be grateful to him because he did save her life by not sending her back to Holloway. But on the other hand, part of her journey to recovery is to actually not have relationships with people who don't make her feel good about herself. So he's a complex character. He has an evolving sense of justice. He's going to realize that there are double standards in terms of how criminals behave and how the police behave. He is a product of a macho, toxic environment, the novels are set in a patriarchy. They're set in a white patriarchy of Los Angeles in the 1940s. So I can't not have a character that represents that. So this is how I've tried to personify it, but I've also tried to symbolize why that patriarchy needs to change. It will take many decades to change. So Randall Lauder, to me, symbolizes not a fixed trope, but a character who foreshadows the crumbling of old masculine toxic values. I'm really interested in male vulnerability as well, and I'd like to grow the vulnerability in Lauder that Elvira inspires, but also how his changing attitudes generate more vulnerability in him. We still, the whole concept of the tough guy is still so prevalent on screen in our books, the kind of conquering hero or the sort of macho culture, that I think it would be really nice for me to have a kind of, to take that stereotype and have a male character be very vulnerable and become vulnerable, because I still don't think we see enough male characters vulnerable. We're living in a time where men are being called upon to call out other men who are aggressing women. But a lot of men are scared. They're vulnerable too. They don't want to confront the tough guy. There's a cowardice, a self-protection rather. But I do feel that, we do need to call it out, and we need to allow men to show their weakness, to not be judged by other men, and to allow soft expressions. Certainly in these gangster genres and crime genres,